Yeah.
Good morning and welcome to the Rational Fans podcast. That is Rational Fans with a Z. I'm your host, Rhett Colvin, joined here by Evan Kruger.
I've been pondering as to why Mason's late every morning, and I've come to the conclusion that just like Ryan Lochte, he's robbed at every gas station that he's ever been to at 4 in the morning.
Nate Haynes.
What's up, Rational Fans Nation? And yeah, I agree with that, Evan.
And the ever-tardy Mason Gray.
You know, you expect me to come in here at 6:40 in the morning and have something clever to say?
No, we expect you to come in at 6:30 in the morning and have something clever to say.
You expect me to come in at 6:30 and have something clever to say?
Yes.
I'm going to have nothing clever to say. I don't even know where I'm at right now. It's way too early for this.
Okay, Mason. Coming up on the show today, we've got a lot of great talk for you. We've got college football previews. We've got an interview with our new athletic director at Wellesley High School, Corey Schutz. But first, we're going to talk about some fantasy football. During the course of this past week, we at Rational Fans compiled the complete fantasy football rankings. And by complete, I mean top 10 at every position, including a bust and a sleeper pick. We did quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. We're going to go ahead and start off with the quarterbacks. Coming in at number 1, Cam Newton.
This is one of the most, besides putting Gronk number 1 in the tight ends, this is probably the most obvious pick. Because even if Cam Newton has a down year through the air, I mean, he's going to get at least 10 rushing touchdowns. He just piles up the points. He just take his rushing stats alone, and he'd probably be like a top 20 running back. So Cam Newton's always a safe pick.
Well, yeah, the thing is, Cam Newton really came onto the scene last year and basically morphed the Carolina Panthers offense, and I'm expecting great things from him again this year as he continues to expand his passing role in the Panthers offense.
You know, it's pretty much what these guys just said. With Cam Newton, he's a threat both through the air and the ground, kind of like Russell Wilson. Why Russell Wilson is usually a top 3, top 5 quarterback. They can get the ball moving on the ground or through the air.
By the way, I should explain a little bit about our rankings. Each of us did a top 10. Number 1 gets 10 points, second 9, and so on and so forth. And the person with the best average between the 4 of us was ranked higher. So Cam Newton had the highest average of points. Coming in at number 2, Aaron Rodgers, 3, Russell Wilson, and then tie for 4th, Andrew Luck and Ben Roethlisberger.
Andrew Luck and Ben Roethlisberger, I can see them having very similar years. They're both big guys that can really chuck the ball around. I think that Ben Roethlisberger has the edge just because he has Antonio Brown, the best wide receiver in the NFL. And Andrew Luck, he's a big question mark coming off last year with that lacerated kidney getting folded up like a lawn chair against the Broncos. You never like to see that. They've had conflicting reports as to how he's progressing here in the offseason, how he's doing at training camp. He didn't play in the preseason game against the Bills. So Andrew Luck is still a question mark, but if he's healthy, look for him to have a really good season.
Yeah, the thing that scares me about Ben Roethlisberger, though, is that he's, 37 years old, and he's really injury-prone at this point in his career, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him miss another 3-4 games this year. But as long as he's healthy, the Steelers' offense is really going to get rolling.
You know, I kind of question why Big Ben is in where he is right now. I mean, he's a great quarterback, and I think Antonio Brown is the reason why he gets a lot of the love that he does. But I think there's other quarterbacks below him that could easily outproduce him. I mean, Drew Brees has outproduced him in at least 4 of the 5 past years. And just because he has Antonio Brown, I still think Drew Brees is the better fantasy quarterback.
Speaking of Drew Brees, he sits at number 6 on our rankings. 7 is Carson Palmer. 8 is Tom Brady. Let's talk about that one. Tom Brady is a very, very good quarterback in my opinion, but I think the reason that he ended up at number 8 on our rankings is because of his 4-game suspension, and nobody wants to have a temporary quarterback for 4 games.
That's the reason that I ranked him. I think I ranked him at like number 7 or something like that. Just because you don't want to have your quarterback sit out for 4 games. I mean, you pick Tom Brady early, then who are you going to get? You're going to get like Joe Flacco or something. I don't know. He could have a really good season after that. But Tom Brady is getting older. He's not invincible. I mean, we've seen him struggle. They didn't do all that great in the playoffs last year. Granted, a lot of their weapons were injured, but even still, Tom Brady, the older he gets, the more questionable he gets as a fantasy quarterback. The Patriots are still going to win a bunch. Whether he'll put up big numbers remains to be seen.
Yeah, those are good points, but once Tom Brady comes back from his suspension, you got to remember that this is the the Patriots, and Bill Belichick always knows what he's doing in New England, and I think as long as you can survive those first 4 fantasy weeks, you're in pretty good shape with Tom Brady.
The thing about Tom Brady is you got to reach for a quarterback in the mid rounds, and that's not something I would like to do. I mean, if you're going to take a top 10 fantasy quarterback, you want them all year instead of wasting, say, an 11th round pick on another quarterback when you can get a lottery ticket wide receiver at the same price. I mean, I'd rather have, I don't know where Josh Gordon's average draft position is, but if I'm taking Josh Gordon in the 11th round compared to someone who will be my backup to Tom Brady for only 4 weeks, I don't see the value there.
Number 9 is Eli Manning, and a tie for 10th is Blake Bortles and Phillip Rivers. Moving on to the sleepers, Mason picked Brock Osweiler, Evan picked Tyrod Taylor, Nate picked Matthew Stafford, and Rhett, that's me, I picked Blake Bortles. He came in at a tie for 10th, so maybe that disqualifies him for being a sleeper.
I don't know. I guess it depends where you can get Blake Bortles in your draft, because he puts up a bunch of yards, but a lot of interceptions as well. He's still young, he's still inexperienced, so he's a question mark. But if you can get him for cheap, he could have a really great year for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And looking at Matthew Stafford, I always thought he's more of an underrated quarterback. I mean, sure, it's the Lions, and usually they stink, but he gets a lot of passing yards. And that's huge in fantasy football. And that's another reason why a lot of times I just use Ryan Fitzpatrick. He might throw some interceptions, but he usually balances it with his vast amount of passing yards.
Going on record, I'm not saying that Brock Osweiler is going to have a great year or anything like that. I'm just saying where he's slotted at his average draft position right now among fantasy quarterbacks, mid to mid 20s. That's absolutely insane value. With DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, you're going to have a top 15, even close to top 10 fantasy quarterback.
I think that a great strategy you could have, maybe pick Brock Osweiler in those later rounds if you want to go ahead and get Tom Brady earlier. He could be a good fill-in for 4 weeks if you can get him in the 18th round or something like that. And I picked Tyrod Taylor just because he just got that huge contract that nobody saw coming. He made the Pro Bowl, which nobody saw coming. And then maybe he could be a great fantasy quarterback, which nobody really sees coming at this point.
For the bust, Mason picked Tony Romo. No surprise there. Evan picked Kirk Cousins. That's a pretty good bust pick. Nate picked Carson Palmer. That one surprised me a little bit. And I picked Joe Flacco.
Why you got to beat up on Joe Flacco? Hasn't he been through enough in the recent years?
Hey, he's an elite quarterback.
Okay, all right.
His QBR is what, like $1 million according to ESPN? Anyway, with the Carson Palmer pick, I did have Carson Palmer on my team last year, and he really saved my fantasy team. He got me a lot of points, but I'm kind of worried about Carson Palmer this year. He's kind of old now too. I think he's 37 too, and basically the Cardinals are going to put a lot on his shoulders this season, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to stand up to the test because without Carson Palmer, well, let's face it, the Cardinals are kind of toast. Sure, they have a good defense, but their offense is going to crumble, just like when he got hurt 2 years ago. They didn't stand a chance against the Panthers in the playoffs.
And you got to remember, Carson Palmer, in his career, he's been those two little nasty words nobody wants attached to him: injury prone. He is an injury prone quarterback, and he is old, and that is not a good combination you want. Kirk Cousins, last year was a whole lot of hype, and then they didn't get very far in the playoffs. And I just don't see Kirk Cousins replicating the great success that he had last year.
Same thing with Tony Romo about Carson Palmer. I mean, Tony Romo just broke his collarbone and had a couple off-season surgeries. And going into the season, you don't want your quarterback having those off-season injuries, and especially the way Dak Prescott's been playing in the couple preseason games that he's had. If Tony Romo does get hurt, Dak Prescott could easily be a nice fill-in for Tony Romo.
Got a couple minutes here. Oh, you got something, Nate?
But Mason, it's the Cowboys, and they can do nothing wrong, according to Jerry World.
Jerry World. Got a couple minutes here. Let's talk about a couple key running back points, and then next week we'll get to the wide receivers and tight ends. Todd Gurley's at number 1. That's really no surprise. Coming in at number 10 is Devontae Freeman. He had a massive fantasy year last year, yet Mason and Evan have him as their busts.
Because almost all of Devontae Freeman's fantasy production came in the early weeks when the Falcons were rolling. They started, 5-0, 6-0?
I think it was 6-0, yeah.
Yeah, and he had 6 touchdowns in a 3-week span or something at one point. I don't remember exactly. But then from there, he just kind of fell off.
Didn't the Falcons miss the playoffs last year?
They were awful.
That's embarrassing.
They finished 7-9 or something like that.
That was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. And he loses a lot of touches to Tevin Coleman, who's getting better as a young running back. He's not going to have a bunch of touchdowns like he did last year. Hey, Devontae, we put him at number 10 almost as a courtesy thing. You can't put somebody who had such a great season last year out of the top 10. That's kind of a no-no.
Yeah.
But even still, I wouldn't reach for Devontae Freeman. If you can get him late, go for it, but don't expect too much from him.
Yeah, I do agree with the Devonta Freeman outlook. Now, you guys are probably a little bit surprised. I had Adrian Peterson as my bust, and here's my thing with Adrian Peterson. He's going to be a bust based on where you're going to draft him. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's almost guaranteed top 3 in every single league, and with Adrian Peterson just getting older and supposedly the Vikings transitioning more to a passing offense now, he's only gonna play on first and second down. They're gonna take him out on third down because 1, he can't pass catch, 2, he can't pass block, and 3, they want to get their backup Jerick McKinnon involved on third down more. And I don't see the production there as a top 3 pick. Now he'll still get you fantasy points, but he's not. I just don't think he's going to get as many carries this season.
Adrian Peterson has always been ranked high for so long, and I've never understood exactly why running backs were always the top picks when it's quarterbacks that get you the most points. Mm-hmm. And a guy like Adrian Peterson, he's prone to having down weeks because he pretty much runs one way, and that's forward, and that's not always the best running style. And Adrian Peterson, the dip is going to happen sometime, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen soon, and it very well may be this year.
The thing with Devonta Freeman, like you said, most of his points came early in the season, and a lot of them came off touchdowns. He isn't a workhorse running back that's going to carry the ball 20 times a game. He's going to be the running back that they pound into the end zone, and especially with Tevin Coleman, who was injured a large part of last season. The Falcons really like Tevin Coleman, and I think he could take snaps away from Freeman.
I'm going to give you a fantasy tip that's going to help you win your PPR leagues. Draft Danny Woodhead late. Nobody else is going to. He gets 800 receiving yards a year.
Yeah, you had him as your sleeper.
Yeah.
To view the complete fantasy football rankings, go ahead and visit our website at RationalFanz.weebly.com. We've got our complete rankings. We'll be breaking down the wide receivers and the tight ends on next week's show. Didn't want to give it to you all this week or else you wouldn't come back next week. Coming up here on the show, we're going to break down the college football rankings, our complete Rational Fans preview, and we have an interview with the new YOC AD, Corey Schitt. Stay tuned.